Cheers. We've just moved through 3 days of badass, soul deep, and alchemical self-care. It wasn't some kind of pretty pampering challenge, was it? It wasn't some kind of a mindset readjustment to become more consistent or more productive or more perfect in any way. This self-care challenge was a reclamation of our sensual selves, our relational selves, our emotional selves. Over the past few days, we've gathered live and behind the Wi-Fi curtain in the privacy of our homes to boost our courage for tenderness, integrity, and community. The challenges that we had over the few days included honoring the human capacity for soothing, crafting special rituals, and holding the power of empathy. Of course, there's so much more we could do together. And you're welcome to check out my membership portals for both the bad self-care portion and maps to intimacy for relationships. This video is a recap, but it's also a taster of what actually happens with me at Meliora Therapeutic Studio and online. So I want you to consider this. Your self-care, our self-care, it's not a self-isolation edict or some kind of solo project. The most important take-home from the challenge was, once again, how important we are for each other. Our self-care plans are going to be exponentially better when we inspire and conspire for our integrity. So let's stay powerful in radical permission to stop pretending that you should be able to take care of yourself in some bubble so that you can somehow be the caretaker of multiple social networks, right? Self-care that actually works is going to attend to your wounds, your longings, your biology, your desire for connection. So you really need to remember that at the core, we're relational. We relate to ourselves, we relate to our environment, and we're relating to everything around us. We're not islands. We're not machines. We're not self-sufficient superheroes. We absolutely all have a strong need for tender, loving support and care, which means that when we become upset, we absolutely need to remember how to soothe ourselves and each other. The psychobabble word for this phenomena is called regulation, co-regulation, and self-regulation. When we tune into this inner wildness, sometimes we find ourselves like crouched in the shadows, like hungry for something or grieving alone. Or sometimes we find that wild side snarling and snappy and critical, and we want to just like rein it in because it's just a total curse of frustration. Or sometimes we even find that part of ourselves in a frenzy of some kind of, effery that puts us out of our self-control and puts us at the risk actually of making some really big, huge mistakes. That wild side is beautiful. It gets all kinds of bad names and labels like inner child, shadow side, crazy bitch, monster, shithead, and all, the list goes on. But that deep part of us is universal in its longing for love, joy, romance, and tenderness. That wild part of us wants to be held and caressed in soft, soothing, and slow, curious wonder and appreciation, fascination, interest. That wild soul wants to live and create within the charm and the magic of life with capital L. So the wild soul factor, sometimes it's a playmate, it's kind of whimsical, fanciful. But because of the kind of oppressive nonsense of our patriarchal system, commanding control and how to get a hold of yourself, it really does encourage us to avoid risk at all costs and to do things that are predictable and so-called responsible. So we've relegated pleasure actually to a prison of roles and rules and duties. And when we want to take on the role of a grown-ass adult, it comes at a cost. It comes at a cost. And we find ourselves complaining about how unhappy we are. That's no wonder. So for day one, we peeled away the rhetoric about what we should do, and we remembered all those little longings that we have, and maybe have been denied for decades, actually. And we explored a truth that the way we were soothed or not soothed doesn't really have any bearing on what we deserve or what we need or what would work or what we can actually access. The way you might have been held or not held isn't a measure of your worth. The way that you were listened to or dismissed in the past has nothing to say about love. But those imprints, those stories that you collected from then, has absolutely shaped your adult self-care style. You're still going to be adaptive and wired for survival, and you're still needing the essential soothing connections, regulation skills, whatever you want to call them, whether you actually learned them or not. So in the gathering, we felt the differences in our bodies as we practiced nurturing our responses to being upset. So those are the things like slowing down your speech, deepening your voice and your breath, maybe even humming soothing sounds, and offering ourselves havening, loving touch, and maybe even improvising a little bit more with our adult ways of doing these things. Because all the ways that the adult self can now tend to those unmet needs really does meet that deeper soul longing, and also meets that wildly creative badass within you, right? Because there's a difference. The difference is really in the nonverbal, not in the things you say, but in the things that actually involves tone and nuance. So it's like this. I could like lean in and say, I care about you. Let's go. Right? Get dressed. Let's go. I care. Come on. I love you. That's absolutely not it, is it? Right? So you can compare it to like this of like, oh, you're upset. I care about you. I care so much, but we need to go. How can I help you? What do you need? Come closer. So those are an example of what we practiced. And day one was really a reinforcement of this truth. Needs are not problems at all. Needs are invitations. Needs are the keys that lead us on the path to intimacy, on the map to intimacy. So then next day two, we talked about rituals that we can design for ourselves. We distinguished routines, the things that we do to keep life functioning, versus rituals, which are the things that make our inner world feel more sacred, or actually honor the fact that our inner world is sacred. So ritual is intentionally soul deep, and routines are more like habits. This element of self-care reclaims an intuitive authority without churches or covens or therapists or spiritual systems that are going to dictate your experience. Real ritual begins with you. And your first step, choosing desire. So the prompt we explored was, what flavor of my soul deep longing am I designing this ritual, this self-care plan for? Some of the options that came was connection, beauty, joy, quietude, magic, whimsy, sweat, and spontaneity. So whatever your heart really desires in the moment deserves to be honored, at least listened to, and given the permission, radical permission, to change it at any time in the midstream, if that's the way it goes. And then we talked about those moments when desire is actually unattainable or unreachable. Yeah, like we had that even in our circle, because at the distance of the internet, it's very common for the deep truth of desire to get somewhat tongue-tied or blurry-eyed or gone, introverted and quiet or hidden. So then we talked about what to do then. And we worked on the body's entry points, which is the senses. Hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, sense of balance, sense of movement, and sense of truth. Or even like the qualitative sense of softening, opening, tenderness. What would bring that? Because when you stir up that sensory aliveness, your desire becomes audible, even though you might be the only one that can hear it. And then once your senses are awakened and your power to choose has clicked back online, you can ask the beautiful questions that are going to guide authentic ritual. Questions like, what do I desire to do with this precious moment I have? And the answer might be something, surprising, like to breathe, to stretch, to make sounds, to scribble something, to dance or sway, to curse or pray, and maybe even blow a kiss to the moon or some kind of release or reclaiming. This is authentic. This is what I'm talking about when I say ritual. And in badassery, ritual really is a desire that inspires you to follow through, not forces you to do something. So real rituals begin with sensuality. And then we went to day 3. I need to change my position. Oh, I need a little adjustment because my foot is falling asleep. Yeah, so then we came to day 3. Everything came to the heart, which is self-care in relationships, because your power doesn't get tested when you're in solitude, when you're alone. It shows up in how you're navigating your connection with others, right? So on day 3, we explored how boundaries get to breathe, not those boundaries that become barricades between you and the world. So to be clear, a zero boundary game is going to make authenticity impossible because you're giving away everything and not really showing up as yourself. But too much boundaries also creates a rigid, walled off kind of access to you and intimacy. So the first thing we did was we looked at coping strategies that actually commonly become maladaptive and keep us from the intimacy that we all absolutely desire, universal. So how we learn to cope with big emotions, unmet needs, that kind of loneliness or overwhelm, whether it was in our childhood or some other toxic relationship, it's likely been sabotaging your current quest for emotional intimacy in your other relationships. So I named the losing strategies. Keeps you safe in a bubble of self-righteous loneliness, but also simply inappropriate for those of us who are after a wildly romantic lifestyle. Our number 1 losing strategy is called being right, because trying to be right and correcting other people actually dismisses somebody else's perspective. It claims superiority, but ultimately pushes connection away. Being right is going to turn every conversation into a debate instead of a bridge. Number 2 is our efforts to control the situation. It might make you feel safer when you're managing everything, like the moods and the timing and the reactions and the outcomes, but control is really fear dressed up as leadership. And that suffocates intimacy too, right? Number 3, unbridled self-expression, or otherwise commonly known as venting. This one sounds counterintuitive because isn't honesty a good thing? Shouldn't we tell people how we feel? But an unfiltered, unbounded emotional dump is triggering. It's like a parent who's out of control. An unbridled self-expression definitely floods our partners and overwhelms any connection we thought we had. And truth without attunement feels like judgment. Next strategy, retaliation. Revenge is sweet. Getting that feels like you're winning on some level. It's triggering dopamine, but that I'm going to make sure you feel what I feel is really keeping score instead of building repair. And retaliation in an adult relationship actually impedes or totally breaks trust. The last one we had is withdrawal. For many of us, withdrawal was the default mode. And often, really, to be honest, it's the only option you had as a kid, right? You hide, you go quiet, you shut down, you start telling yourself you don't need them, anything, you don't want to feel them or anything. And withdrawal keeps us kind of alive in a system that doesn't meet our needs. But in adult intimacy, withdrawal is measured as abandonment of yourself and of your other person. It erases connection. So the problem with all of these strategies is that they're still running the show. It's not a choice. They're automatic. They're default. So even after the danger has passed, we're still using them. So in the badassery portals and workshops, we're practicing a really valuable skill. It's how to stay responsive and honest within an upset moment. So boundaries aren't made out of sticks and stones. They're more organic, kind of like a garden hedge or a river or a nature trail. Because any kind of ultimatum or control patterns that you might have adapted to stay safe are still ruining your life. They create scripts like, I don't need anyone. I don't want to be a burden. I can do it all myself. I don't want to ask. I'll deal with it later. Or you just get that thing of like, this is all bullshit. I'm just better off on my own, right? So whatever happened in your previous relational moments doesn't need to stay and remain your template for what's to come next. You can cut those chains that are binding you to loneliness and boredom, because boundaries are energetic currencies, and intimacy is not a test of how healed you are. It's not a reward for being good. Intimacy is a universal need. Everybody. The fact that you might not have healthy boundaries, it's not your fault. It's not your flaw. It's not your failure. It's conditioning. It's cultural indoctrination of a system, what we call patriarchy. We designed that system so that we could control life, chaos, war, starvation, but it also weaponizes shame and other atrocities as an attempt to establish order. And now we're pivoting. We're pivoting away from hierarchical patterns and into equality. And I offered a simple tool to help you navigate the power of intimacy, and I call it the remote control of empathy. This magical remote control is an imaginative way to set the pace on your intuitive superpower so that you can turn your attention away from control things and onto the beauty of desire. So let's review that. Your relational controls are as follows. Pause, where it's like saying, hang on, I need a breather before I continue. You could press the stop altogether. Oh, halt. This isn't rejection. I just need a moment of regulation. Or you could press the rewind. Could we go over that again? Can you slow that down and tell me again? Could you repeat what you just said? Maybe slower? That rewind request is going to allow some repair, and it's going to prevent you from ruminating on misinterpretations and misunderstandings. Then we have the record button. Record is for accountability. You say something like, hey, okay, so for the record, the story I'm getting is, or for the record, what I'm hearing you say is blah, 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 blah. Do I have that right? Is there anything I've missed? The fast forward button is not used as often, but it would sound something like, hey, okay, I think I'm on the same page of you. I got it. I'm ready to move ahead with this. Let's go. Right? That's fast forward. Fast forward's not some kind of rush momentum. It really is about a readiness and a collective joining. Yeah. So all of these controls are here to help you stay connected without abandoning yourself, because your well-tuned empathy focused on desire and connection instead of keeping things out kind of boundaries is very powerful. It actually lets someone else have their feelings, be held in their feelings, while you can still stay true to yourself. You can stay anchored in your own rhythm. And, having pace control is a communication method that honors both people, or all the people in the dynamic. So day 3, in summary, is about this truth. Intimacy is kind of a dance. And we absolutely have to choose the music, the rhythm. So when you weave them all together, these 3 days have given a foundation where day 1 was about getting real and messy about self-care. Day 2 was about the ritual part resonating with our truth. And then day 3 was relational pacing with boundaries that breathe, where altogether it's all about empathy, not as a source of control or burnout, but as a source of power, where intimacy feels like a treasure and not a sacrifice. So for the finale, I'd like to do a mini ritual together. What I want you to do is get a blank paper and a drawing tool and then come back. Pen, paper. So what you're going to do is kind of just loosen up your hand. Start with maybe an outside shape. And then inside, whatever the shape is, you're just going to doodle. You're going to draw kind of chaotic lines onto the page. You can include the shape of letters or musical notes. Yeah, so you're just going to play around for a little bit. And then, once it gets kind of there, you're going to try setting a different pace. Maybe you're going to slow down. Maybe you're going to get a little bit more scribbly because that feels good for you. So you can pause here and there at any point. You can pause this video and continue, whatever. I also think you might want to hum as you do this on your own. It really enhances the experience. So doodling, it's a wonderful way for your nervous system to regulate because it's a gentle task. And when you orient your body to doing something while you're feeling something, it creates a massage in the brain because you can't fret and draw at the same time. And you might find that it feels impossible at first, but gradually it starts to be like, it doesn't matter what it looks like, right? I sometimes play music when I'm doing this too, but I really like humming. And then, when you're done, just pause, check in with yourself and see if you can access more of your needs, your longings, your desires. So I hope that's helped you today to remind you to connect with your empathy and your desire, so that what I wish for you today is that the next moment of your wild and precious life has integrity, that you feel like you have access to a choice about what you're going to do with the next moment. Ultimately, thank you. I want to thank you for showing up brave, embodied, present, curious. My work in the badassery self-care challenges and the portal is about growing spaces that are tuned into wisdom, tuned into sensuality, relationality, and even a romantic lifestyle. Ultimately, I'd like to be here to honor your humanity. And my magic word is Meliora, always, ever better, ever braver, ever more you. So stay wild, stay true to yourself, and keep doing your thing, my dear. Keep doing your thing. Bye for now.